Are you looking for a way to try out other Raspberry Pi OSs without having to create multiple SD cards? Do you want to try another operating system without having to spend a lot of time? Stay tuned and I'm going to show you just such an option. Welcome to another edition of Tech Bites with Ron Nutter, your home for all things relating to smart home technology. In this episode, we're going to talk about using something called Berryboot with your Raspberry Pi 400 in your smart home. Hi, I'm Ron Nutter, and we're going to be working on this together. This content is also available as an Amazon Flash briefing or podcast. Please go to techbiteswithronnutter.com for more information. For any items mentioned in this episode, there are affiliate links in the description. If you click on these links, I will get a small commission, but that won't affect the price you pay for the item. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe now and enable notifications. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. Now, here's what we're going to be covering. First of all, what is Berryboot? Once you've seen this video, something I think you're going to want to go out and try real quick. We're going to go over how to install Berryboot, and this is going to be a little bit different from what you're used to, but nothing that you can't handle. And then how to use Berryboot, and that's where the rubber really hits the road. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, I'm sure you're all dying to know, what is Berryboot, Ron? Well, I tell you, this is something that I just found out about recently, and it is well worth the time to get to learn about it. Now, Berryboot is something, if you've heard of VMware or Microsoft's hypervisor product, this is similar to what you're going to be looking at. But I tell you, this is not your grandfather's system. This is something very interesting. For those of us who go back to the DOS days, there are some things you could do then about having kind of a mini boot system. And that would get you to where you could have different operating systems readily available. And it was just a very minor thing to make that happen. So this is something that I think you really want to take a look at. Now, a couple of things I do want to point out to you. This is going to be just for the Raspberry Pi 400, which you see me do another video about, or you can do the Raspberry Pi 4, but this is something unique to the latest Raspberry Pi platform. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, you might be able to find an older version of this that might work on an earlier Raspberry Pi, probably no earlier than the 3 platform. But if you haven't already gotten to a Raspberry Pi 4 or don't already have the Raspberry Pi 400, then I think you've got a good reason to go ahead and do it. Now, installing it, that's going to be the next step. As you are installing your latest smart home device, grab a copy of my smart home checklist. This will help you record information about each device as you set it up. This will prove helpful when you need to find out where to get the firmware updates from or support on that device. You will be subscribed to my email list in exchange for the checklist. I won't share, rent, or sell your information to anyone. Now, if you've done a little bit of work with the Raspberry Pi, regardless of the platform, you're used to downloading an image file, burning it, or writing it to an SD or micro SD card. This is going to be a little bit different. And there's a couple of steps that I'm going to take you through that I've not seen a lot of the other videos talk about, because I want to make sure I save you some of the headache that I went through, because I went through hours of troubleshooting figuring out why this didn't work. Now, they're big on talking about, and I don't mean this in a derogatory form, about downloading the image or downloading the zip file. As you can see right here, here's the link to the one that's available on the day that I'm shooting this video. But there's a couple of things you really need to think about, because I lost hours of time troubleshooting this. I first tried to be, well, I'll just take an SD card out of the package, put it in the Raspberry Pi 400 using my handy dandy SD card reader, or my other, well, it just dropped here, or my other handy dandy SD card reader. Can never have enough SD card readers. And just copying the files over. Well, it kind of worked, it kind of didn't. So I'm going to walk you through the exact steps that I took through to make this all happen. So let's switch over to the process to get this all started. Now, there is a program that I found reference to, and I'll put the links in the show notes, description, however you're getting to this video, for something called the SD card formatter. This is from the industry standards group that handles the SD cards. And this is something you're going to walk through, at least if you have a problem, then go ahead and try the process that I'm going through. Now, in this case, I have yet another SD card reader. This came with one of my Raspberry Pis. So I've just put it in the reader, and we'll slide it right into the port on my Intel NUC, and you should see the card change status here. Okay, it opened it up. Now, we'll go ahead and close this, because for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to reformat the card. Now, there's two levels of reformatting that you can see. The first one, if your SD card works out of the gate and is fine, doesn't have any booting problems or any weird behavior, and you'll know weird when you see it, then you don't need to do this. But I'm walking you through this just so that maybe on the front end, if you want to do it, because it seems like Berryboot's a little more sensitive. So with having that in there, having the micro SD card in there, then you see it's already found it. And if it didn't, you can click refresh. Now we'll start off with a quick format, and that should be all we're going to have to do. And we'll say, yes, should be all that you need to do. See, it came up, it's fine, it's happy. Okay, we're good to go. Now, if for some reason it doesn't play nice, then your next step is to overwrite format. That's going to take a lot longer. So I'm trying to get you up and running quickly. So let's go ahead and just start with a quick format, which is what we've done. So we'll close that window out, and we'll go here, and we're going to actually open up a couple of windows. First, downloads, and I'll scoot that off to the side. And then we will open up another window to the USB drive. Now, notice it said 28 gigs. We're not worried about that at this point, because there's always going to be some loss of capacity due to formatting. So we'll go ahead here and click on Berryboot and extract all. Now, in this case, we'll browse. We will go to the USB drive. We'll select folder and extract. And since we've already got a window open, it's going to be showing us what is running at that point. Takes about a minute roughly. I was really hoping to do this all on the Raspberry Pi, or in my case, the Raspberry Pi 400. And I just had intermittent quirks that just simply didn't make sense. So that's why I kind of had to fall back and go to what was going to work. So now let's get the card moved over to the Raspberry Pi 400. All right, now that we've got the micro SD card already created, I've placed it into the Raspberry Pi 400, and let's go ahead and get it turned on. So I'm going to switch over on the inputs to the Raspberry Pi 400, where the screen's going to go black there for just a moment, but you should see, okay, it's got the power light up. Okay, now if it stays on what I call the rainbow square screen for more than a few seconds, that's a good indication you've got a problem. So what we're going to do here is go through a few steps here. Now, since we can see the borders at the top and the bottom, yes, we're going to disable overscan. When I'm doing big downloads initially, I like to do it over wire just to minimize having fun. So I've already got that in place, and it sensed that because it's the Wi-Fi country has gone blank here. Okay, yes, it sees the keyboard. So we'll click OK. This is the card we want to install it to. Just leave your file system at ext4, and then we'll click format. This won't take but just a few minutes, and it's copying the files that it needs. It's a rather interesting installation process in the grand scheme of things, that it sits there and copies what it needs to into memory, writes it out to the drive, and then we should be through here. Bingo. So this is why I wanted to go through multiple steps, and I took you through the way I did it, because if I set up the micro SD card every time the way I've shown you, then this is going to work consistently. So what we'll do at this point is we'll click console only. That's just the fancy way of saying command line version. We'll click OK. And then it will take just a little bit of time here to get this installed. Okay, now we've gotten to the end, and we do have to do a reboot. Anytime pretty much you install a new operating system to this, then you're going to have to do a reboot, because there's some things that Berryboot's not going to know until it gets restarted. And this is where when I did some initial testing, the Berryboot process just would not play the game the way it should. So if you hit the spacebar, any key on there other than enter, then the timer will quit. So if you've got more than one OS, then it will show up here. And if you want to go ahead and boot with that one, and then it will just go through the process here, and it has it pretty quick. And it's had to resize the partition, it looks like. And so it looks like it's okay. And again, so you're set ready to go at that point. So it's really pretty straightforward. And let me get it rebooted here. And then some things I want to show you. So that's end-to-end how you get a system up and running. So if you want to have more than one version of Raspberry Pi OS, you can. It's up to you. And there's also a few other options to look at. And now that we've got it rebooted, then what we can do is go on here, and you'll actually go into edit menu. And this is where you will start the process of getting another operating system. So you can either click add OS, and it will show you different options available. Now, I've worked with Ubuntu some. For those of you who remember a company called Novell, OpenSUSE was something that I became very familiar with early on. And that's just the ones that are the most popular, and they have some appliances. Now, this is something that I'm going to look at here in a future video, is setting up my own Berryboot server so I can have systems doing network installs across the network. So that's going to be an interesting thing to try. And do I have a good reason? No, I just want to try it. Now, there is a few things that we'll look at. We're actually not going to do another installation. We'll just click cancel. You can certainly back up your configuration. That's something I strongly encourage you to do. When you have multiple OSs, think about setting one of them as the default, because that way you can have, if you turn it on and you get distracted or somebody's talking to you, it will go ahead and boot up at least into the one you're probably going to use the most. Now, if you're really hardline, you can go into edit config, and that's when you're going to get down into the weeds. But that's not something that either one of us needs to worry about yet. And then we can go into more options. So if you have one of the OSs set up the way you like it, but you want to experiment with it, but you don't want to get yourself boxed into the proverbial manhole, this is where you would clone the operating system. And that way it takes it, think of it kind of like a snapshot backup. It takes it to where you've got it now, and you can save it where it is that point in time, and then you can go on forward with what you want to do. If there's a damage in the system to where it's not playing nice the way it should, then you can repair the file system. If you want to set a password that only you can get into that one, if you're sharing this with somebody, again, totally up to you. And if we click exit, it's going to make us go through a reboot, but you're going to see why I wanted to do that in just a moment, because it's got to make sure that it's dealing with a known situation, and it doesn't take that long to back up. As you can see, it's already up and running at this point. Now, when you're ready to shut down, you can just click on that little button. It powers down your Raspberry Pi 400. Now, you should do the same thing with a Raspberry Pi 4 rather. So this is something I think very interesting to take a look at. Well worth your time to do it. So we've gone through going over what is Berryboot, how to install it, and how to use it. And now it's time for you to go out and have some fun. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see videos on the screen that are similar to the one you just watched or other content that YouTube thinks you might be interested in. If this video helps you or provides value, please click on that like button, thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please click on subscribe now and enable notifications. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.